Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. I know it's been a little while since my last video, and I'm sure that everyone has been eagerly anticipating my new video. So here we go. Um, I hope you guys have been enjoying some of the other videos on our channel. Some of the other people in the classroom have been doing like cooking and fitness and read alouds and things like that. So a little bit of a theme. Um, I don't really have a theme. I'm kind of just winging it. So today, I thought I'd talk about something that I personally am interested in, and that's geography. I think geography is kind of neat. Looking at maps, seeing where things are located, seeing what's near what, how to get places, and things to do and stuff like that. So I think geography is kind of a neat thing to to kind of study and so I thought I'd talk about someplace that's we should all be familiar with because it's New York State. It's where we live. There's a lot of cool things to do in New York. I think New York's a pretty cool place to live. It's close by to a lot of places. You can get to travel is not too bad. Compared to other places in the country. But I think New York's kind of a neat place to live, and there's plenty of things to do, um, nearby. So New York is located in the northeastern part of the United States, and it is one of the original 13 colonies. So um, if you'd like, you can pause the tape and try and figure out what the 13 colonies were. But I have the answers for you. So starting from the south, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So no Vermont. Vermont was not a state back then, or a colony, excuse me, and Maine was part of Massachusetts. So that's where we get our 13 from. So um, we live pretty much in and around the capital of Albany, or the capital of New York State, Albany. Um, uh, Kingston was the first capital, but Albany's been capital since 1797, so that's a pretty good run. So New York is the fourth most populous state. So of all the states, it's got the fourth highest total of people that live in it. A lot of that has to do with New York City. They definitely raise our numbers up. So I don't know if you can think of the four that are, or the three that are above us, but a couple of them might be pretty obvious. California. California is a bigger state than us, and they've got some pretty big cities, and they have almost 39 million people that live in that state. Texas, another kind of big state, has got 29 million people that live in it. And Florida's got 22 million. New York has 19 million, basically, that live in the state. So still, there's 46 other states below us. So um, the biggest cities in the state, as you can imagine, well, New York City. After that, it gets a little tougher. The next biggest state, or the next biggest city after New York, is Buffalo, then Rochester, then Yonkers, which is sort of part of New York City, but somehow they get there in the fourth spot. Syracuse is fifth, and then Albany is sixth. So those are some of the larger cities in the state. So, as I mentioned, even though we're fourth in population, we are 27th in size. So that's a pretty good difference. Even though you look at a map and you think New York's pretty good size, we go out here, we go up there, we go down there, but there are 26 other states that are larger than us, land land-wise, area-wise. Um, so I don't know if you can name the top five. The first one, probably most people will get, Alaska. That's the biggest state. After Alaska, another sort of easy one to get if you're looking at a map would be Texas. Third would be California, which I mentioned was the most populous. After California, you start looking around a little bit, and you'll find Montana is fourth. And then the one that I didn't realize that was fifth is New Mexico. So it's kind of square, sitting on the bottom there, but apparently New Mexico was fifth as far as size-wise. Well, like I said, we're 27th, which means there's quite a few states below us. So I don't know if you can name the five smallest states. Um, and like I said, anytime I ask one of these questions, you could pause and you could try and figure it out yourself, or you could just wait a second and I'll give you the answer. So the answer to the smallest states are New Hampshire, which if you're looking at a map, you can sort of figure. New Jersey, which I was surprised was in there. Connecticut, Delaware, and Rhode Island, much to no one's surprise. I figured most people probably got Delaware, Rhode Island down the bottom there. So, interestingly, all five of those states are basically in the Northeast. You know, when people first moved to this country, everybody was kind of on top of each other on the East Coast, and you know, they carved out states, and they tended to be a little bit smaller. And as we moved farther west and south, the states got bigger. So that's why a lot of those bigger states, you know, like I said, Texas, California, Montana, New Mexico, and Alaska, all out west. So, but you know, but we're a good size, and we have decent population, and with that comes a lot of things and a lot of places to go and people to see and things to do and stuff. Um, we do have five states that border us. So that would be Pennsylvania to the south, New Jersey to the south, and then Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont all the way up. We have one country that borders us, which I'm sure most of you would probably recognize as Canada. So we also have some interesting landforms and features in the state that you can go visit. We have three mountain ranges. Most everybody, I'm probably sure, is familiar with the Adirondack Mountains. It's in the Adirondack Park, and that's huge. And there's lots of things to do up at the Adirondack Mountains. You can hike, you can fish, you can camp. Some pretty cool things to do up there. The Catskill Mountains are south of us, and the Adirondack Mountains are north of us. And then we also have part of this chain of mountains called the Appalachians. And they run all the way down almost, I think, to Georgia. In fact, there's an Appalachian Trail that you can walk. Basically, either ends or starts in Georgia, depending on where you're from, and ends and finishes somewhere up in Massachusetts or Maine. And it's a few thousand miles and take you a long time to walk it, but some people do. Some people like take time off and spend a whole summer or whatever, whatever it takes to walk, and they walk it. So good for them. So some of the other features in New York State that are pretty neat that people like, we have a lot of interesting and sort of famous water features. We do border one ocean, as most of you would get, would be the the Atlantic Ocean. We also have two Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes would be Ontario, which is kind of north of Rochester and Syracuse, and then Lake Erie, which is to the west of Buffalo. And those two lakes are the lakes that give us lots of snowstorms. Precipitation comes in, comes across the lake, gets cold, and then Buffalo and Syracuse and places like that get a lot of snow. Sometimes we get some effects from it, but there's five Great Lakes. So along with Erie and Ontario, there's Michigan, Huron, and Superior. So I know we've talked about that in class before. Some of you guys should recognize that. So we also have there's five Great Lakes. There's also five Finger Lakes out in New York, and they look like fingers. And they were formed millions of years ago when glaciers came down and kind of dug up the land. And as the ice retreated, it kind of formed these depressions, and water filled in, and boom, you got five Finger Lakes. So a lot of people like to go out and visit them. There's Lake Champlain, pretty good sized lake, kind of in between Vermont and New York. Lots of fun things to do up there. There's Lake George, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with, and probably a lot of you guys have visited. Lots of fun things to do up there on the lake and in and around the lake, and lots of people visit it. It's pretty famous. There's much smaller, but there's a Lake Placid, which probably is more famous for hosting two Winter Olympics than for the lake itself, but still it's a pretty fun place to go visit. We also have two pretty good sized rivers. We've got the Mohawk River, which runs east to west and then basically meets up with the Hudson River, which is kind of the big, popular, more famous river in New York. Hundreds of years ago, people would come from Europe and they would come into New York, and then New York was getting crowded and they wanted to kind of move out, and so people would come up the Hudson River to Albany, and then they'd go farther west. And actually, that led to the creation of a water feature, kind of man-made, but the Erie Canal, and that helped people move out to the Great Lakes and then move farther west and go settle out in different parts of the country. So that was kind of neat. And then probably the most recognizable water feature in New York State is Niagara Falls, big falls out in Buffalo. There's a New York Falls and there's a Canadian Falls, and both of them are beautiful to go out and visit, and lots of people like go out there for vacation. Years ago, a lot of people would go there on their honeymoon, go visit Niagara Falls. As I mentioned before, there is the Adirondack Park, which is huge, and there's so much stuff to do in there. You could fit five national parks: Yellowstone, Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, Glacier Park, Olympic Park, all in the borders of the Adirondack Park. So it's huge, and there's lots of stuff to do up there. So that's kind of fun. If going out and visiting lakes and ponds and streams and mountains and hiking isn't your thing, New York has 13 major sports teams. I myself, a big sports fan, so there's lots of professional sports teams that you can go watch play. I mean, there's hundreds of smaller teams, baseball, basketball on a smaller level, even colleges. But if you're interested in going to pro games, we have 13 major pro sports teams. Football, we have 3. We have the Giants, the Jets, and the Bills, although the Giants and the Jets play their home games in New Jersey. We'll just ignore that because they still have New York in front of their name. We have 2 basketball teams. There's the Brooklyn Nets, and then there's the New York Knicks, although some people would say that the Knicks haven't been a professional team for quite some time. We have 3 hockey teams. We have the Islanders, the Rangers, and the Sabres. The Sabres play out in Buffalo. The other 2 play down around New York City. We have 2 baseball teams. We have the Mets and the Yankees. And then we also have 2 major league soccer teams. We have New York City FC, which the FC stands for Football Club. And then we have the New York Red Bulls, which I think they also play their games in New Jersey, and we're going to ignore that as well. So there's also a few other, if you're not into those sports, there's Watkins Glen Racetrack where they race cars. There's the National Tennis Center where they play the U.S. Open every year down in New York City, and so if you're a tennis fan, you can go visit down there. We have the Saratoga Racecourse, which is a half an hour away from us, and right up the road, and that's fun. A lot of people like horse racing. They have a museum up there you can go to. We also have the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's located out in Cooperstown, New York, about an hour and a half, maybe a little less west from here, and that's kind of fun to go out and see that. All in all, there's a lot of cool things to do in New York, and a lot of cool places to go. So, and if you haven't had a chance to visit some of these places or explore, maybe hopefully someday in the near future you will. It's not a bad time right now, considering what's going on in the rest of the country, to go out and visit some places in New York. We're pretty safe right now, so if you've got some time and a weekend, and maybe you can go and visit some of these places. So everybody be safe, take care, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.